The leaders of the 4 Grand Slam tournaments in tennis say they are taking Naomi Osaka's concerns very seriously when it comes to mental health. Just days earlier, she faced an ultimatum, though. Show up for media post-match or face harsher fines. She got $15,000 levied so far. She could even be disqualified, they said. Their new pledge comes just a day after Osaka, the world's #2 ranked tennis player, dropped out of the French Open suddenly, citing anxiety and depression. The crux of the controversy right now really comes down to one thing, and that's mental health, specifically where boundaries could or should be set when it comes to difficult professional obligations. Let's bring in Dr. Jessi Gold to make some Twitter fights into something more tangible, hopefully helpful tonight. She's a psychiatrist based in St. Louis. Dr. Gold, it's good to see you again. So, Naomi Osaka says she cannot speak to the media due to her mental health issues that she's battling. This immediately hit a nerve with you. I know you were tweeting about it, and millions of other people. Why is that?
You know, it's very rare to see an athlete and an athlete of color so openly talk about mental health. And I think so openly take a stance with boundaries, and such a firm stance with boundaries, like I'm doing this and I'm doing this no matter what you say, because it is really important to me and it really has been hurting me. And it really doesn't matter what you say about me playing or not, or if I'm going to be fined or not. I need to do this for me. It's extremely rare to see that, and on such a big stage, and so openly for everybody to hear the words mental health be said by someone like that, which is why I was so openly saying things on Twitter and so openly impressed.
All right, now on the other side, critics have said you cannot have it both ways, accepting the fame and the fortune and all the power and $55 million a year, and then refuse to do the one hard part, and that's talk in interviews. One fan in France had this response.
Ce genre de choses, je pense qu'ils font partie du métier et que tous les autres tenniswomen sont obligés d'accepter. Et à mon avis, ils vont pas tous en conférence de presse parce qu'ils en ont envie. Et ben c'est dommage. Elle gâche un talent, elle gâche là une victoire peut-être à une compétition, etc. Et apporter du spectacle aux supporters. Donc c'est dommage.
Pretty notably, Dr. Gold, Serena Williams supports Naomi Osaka, saying interviews are difficult, her word. She said also they made her stronger in the past. Since interviews are mandatory in this sport, you know, and a lot of us have difficult tasks professionally that we deal with every single day as well, what do you advise your clients to do to cope with necessary but, you know, hard parts of their careers?
Yeah, it's a really tough question. I mean, I think I would say one thing to think about is what our jobs have historically been doesn't mean that they have to be like that forever. So that's one thing I would take with a lens here, is that, you know, tennis is a sport that's been around for a long time and has had things that have been applied to it as like a one-size-fits-all model. And maybe one thing that has worked for everyone has not always worked for individual people, but nobody's spoken up before, and she's the first person to talk. And boundaries are individual. And I think it's really important that we think about that, especially when we're returning to work, and returning to work with people who might have liked working from home and might have liked having flexibility in their work schedule. And one
But what if you do have to do it, Dr. Gold? That's the thing.
Right,
like,
I know.
You know, if you work at the Gap and you say, you know, I prefer not to fold shirts, and they say, well, you know, that's part of your job. You have to fold shirts.
Right,
if it's
absolutely.
just a hard task at your work, what do you do?
Absolutely. I totally understand that. I just wanted to put out there that there are definitely not like one-size-fits-all models for everybody, and we do need to say like we can have that in workplaces. But I do think that when that happens, what I say to people is try to like take an assessment of how you're feeling at work and say, all right, when I have to do things, how can I cope? We don't always think about how to cope with things that work for us. There can be definitely in the moment skills that can work. You know, if you're feeling super anxious, there are ways to be able to deep breathe through it. There are ways to be able to, like, you know, use scents in your workplace that are not super obvious that you're having an anxiety attack, and you can turn to a scent, you can turn to deep breathing. There's ways to do things in the moment. There's ways to cope in the long term. And I always say, like, you know, there are things that you hate in the workplace and you can tolerate them, and that's the part of resiliency. I like that part of when you think about resiliency, as opposed to resiliency being like the workplace is the place that you just need to deal with because it's the problem, but resiliency being like, how do you tolerate a workplace that has its challenges?
And I know this is important to you. I think we have 30 seconds left, so I want to make sure that we hit on it. At what point in anyone's life do we know it is time to just take a step back entirely? I have to reset, and then I can reemerge.
when work is definitely interfering with your day-to-day life or interfering with your relationships and it comes home with you. I think that is a really big sign that you need to take a step back and reevaluate.
Dr. Jessi Gold in St. Louis, a friend of the show, and if people check out your Twitter, you always have great insights on mental health. Thank you so much, Dr. Gold.
Thank you for having me.